In the last couple of months, I've traveled to about 13 different states to do multiple different shoots for multiple different clients. So I wanted to make this video right now when it's fresh on my mind to kind of break down the cost structure of that and also talk about some of the logistics, what you need to do in order to be able to provide out-of-town shoots for different clients. And especially, I heard this from a lot of my students that live in small towns. They felt like the clients that I was talking about, they weren't in their town. Maybe the companies that were around them weren't big enough for them to charge some of the price points that I talk about in my videos. So I think one of the best ways to do that is just to expand beyond your local area and do shoots around the country. I did shoots in small towns like Rome, Georgia, and I've done really big shoots in New York City, in Manhattan. That's just in the last couple of months. So I think it's possible for a lot of different people to do the same, to basically expand. I live in a moderately big city in Chicago, so there's plenty of work here. But I would say we do about half our work throughout the year, at least the last couple of years, out of Chicago, traveling across all the different states in the US and sometimes international too. So 3 cost structures I need to break down in this video, and I'm going to jump in just to a blank document here to kind of show you the breakdown so you could kind of copy and then put in your own numbers. But there's 3 big pillars, right? There's labor cost. That's you and your crew or whoever you end up hiring. I'll kind of explain my process there. Then there's gear. I always charge separately for gear. And most of the times my client won't even ever see that breakdown, but internally I keep track. So then it makes sense when I reinvest in gear. And third is obviously the travel expense. Again, couple ways to go about that as well. You could do a pass-through cost, meaning whatever you spend on travel, flights and hotels and things like that we'll talk about, you just bill the client separately for that. Or you could do a lump sum. So what I do is I charge a client a lump sum. They never see the breakdown of it. And I take care of all the travel expenses within that. But I make sure my estimate is pretty accurate. So I actually don't end up spending more than I quoted for on the travel side because things could go wrong. Obviously, in the last couple of months, there were plenty of flight issues that I had to deal with that did cost me a little bit extra. Let me first break down the labor cost and what it takes to actually do a shoot out of town. I'll give you an example here of a one-day shoot. So you would do a shoot one day out of town, and then there's some travel expense associated with it when it comes to labor. So what do we have under labor, right? So I decide what kind of crew I need. Typically, what I could do is I could fly with 2 people, including myself. So I play the role of director and producer. And then I would bring my director of photography with me. I typically don't like to hire a local director of photography, so I get a consistent look across all my videos. Then when I get to a town, I might hire a grip or a sound person or 2, right? So then I could assemble a crew, minimum 3, sometimes 4. Some of our shoots are much bigger. Sometimes it could be up to 10. And in those cases, I might travel with 3 or 4 people. But just to keep it simple, let's say in a very simple shoot, I'm going to take myself, right? So I'm the director here, director cost. Then you also are going to have the cost of your director of photography, your DP. And then these are the people that I'm going to take with me, right? So that's me and one other person. Locally, let's say I'm going to hire an audio tech and I'm going to hire a grip, for example, to help me with lighting. So that creates a crew of 4, 2 local and 2 from my side that I'm bringing on the flight, right? So then I will put whatever I decide that my rate is or whoever I'm hiring's rate is. Right now, I usually at this stage, I don't worry about the profit margin. I just basically put down my hard cost here so I know exactly what I'm going to spend. So let's say my rate was 1,000, my DP's rate, let's say was 800. And again, this doesn't include any gear. This is for a 10-hour day that you're going to be working on the shoot day, right? I still will talk about the travel days. Then you have your audio tech. Typically, they are hired with gear. Let's put 1,000, and I'm just using round numbers here. And it always depends what city you're hiring from. The rates are always different. And let's say I'm going to do 600 for a grip that's going to help me set up lighting. Now, these are more experienced people, but again, rates could go up from there, but obviously they could be cheaper if you're hiring less experienced people. So this becomes basically your total cost for the shoot day. Now, here's the thing. With travel day, you also have to pay your crew that you're bringing with you, right? So my audio tech, for example, and my grip are local people. So they're only getting paid for the day of the shoot. This is a one-day shoot that I'm using as an example. But let's say I was bringing myself and a DP, or in a case, sometimes I don't take myself at all, right? Maybe I'm just a business owner here and I'm sending a director and a DP. Basically, it ends up being this way. The shoot day, let's say it's on a Wednesday, there's a travel the day before. I always do it the day before, never the day of the shoot. Even if it's a short shoot, you never want to take that risk. And sometimes you have another travel day after the shoot ends, right? I typically don't like to fly out the night of the shoot. It makes for a very long day. This past couple months, we had to do that sometimes when we actually had to fly maybe to a different city the next day. So sometimes that becomes not an option. But in most cases, there will be, for every shoot day that you have, if it's a one shoot day, you have a travel day before, travel day after. So I would put, this would go the travel day basically. So this is the labor for the shoot day. And then this is the travel. So for the DP or for the director, there's going to be two of those. And typically the travel days work as a half day rate. So some people will charge you half of their day rate. Some other people will charge you 2/3 of their day rate. This is really depending on what kind of person you hire. I prefer to do 2/3, but just to keep it simple, let's do 500 for the DP travel. This will be the travel in day, right? And we have a travel out day. So this would be an additional $500, right? So just to cut it in half, we'll do it for the DP as well. And then these audio, tech, and the grip don't get any type of half day, right? Because they're local. We found them. For example, right now, I hired a couple of my students for this, but you could use Staff Me Up or other websites like Mandy.com to hire people or just ask for reference from people you may know. Now, again, this is no travel cost and this is no travel gear at all. This is just straight labor cost, what I'm going to pay out to my crew. If I take myself out of the equation, this is still my cost as a video production company owner, okay? So then we talk about gear, and I'm gonna do another video if you're interested. I'll show you exactly how I travel with about 6 cases, but a lot of times we will rent locally too. So it really depends on the size of the shoot. On a smaller shoot where it's 2-3 person, I could easily travel if I go with one other person and take almost everything we need. In most cases, we do take everything we need. That's multiple cameras, maybe a Ronin lighting, and even sometimes sound equipment if you're not hiring a local sound person. But I'll do a separate gear related video. But I would break down the gear cost here, right? So maybe your camera would go here, your lighting would go here, your audio would go here. And then you basically put the standard rates of what rental houses rent these things for. Even if you own this gear, you still want to break it down like this. So for example, I could tell you an FX9, Sony FX9 package with a zoom lens that we use, that's I think a couple of Fuji zoom lenses. If I rented it locally, it would have cost, I think $550 was the cost per day. Now, for these type of pricing when it comes to gear, I don't charge for the travel in or out, right? Only the days getting used, because that's the same thing if I hire that locally through a rental house. So you will put that, if there's 2 cameras, or in this case, it'd be 2 cameras, so it'd be double that, and that's with a lens and with some batteries and everything else you need, right? So then you might maybe have to rent a tripod. Sometimes I can't bring a tripod, so some of our shoots we had to end up renting locally just because it wasn't worth it to bring those. Lighting, let's say you just have a very simple lighting package that could be $400 a day. And then audio, in this case, the audio tech took care of it, so there's no audio. But if you were bringing a boom and a lav, maybe you put $100 or $150. Again, these are the cost of a rental house, so you treat it the same way when you're pricing this out. So let's say that becomes $1,500 for the gear here. Again, I'm just doing very basic math, but I usually use a much more elaborate template and I plug in these numbers. Now, let's jump into the travel costs. So far, these are our costs, our hard costs, and we're only playing the role of the director. But if you're a DP, for example, you will play the role of the DP. I never travel with less than 2 people because then it's almost impossible to bring anything. You can, but then I have to trust the entire local crew, which I don't want to in most cases, to get a consistent look. So director DP is my minimum amount of people I'm willing to take, typically 3 people actually. Now for travel costs, let me break down all the different things and I'll note them below, but these are all the different things that come up during travel that you might not account for, okay? So for your travel cost, you got your transport to airport. A lot of people forget to charge for this, but I would basically, if I took a Uber or a Lyft, or if I even drove the cost of gas, I would actually put that in my budget here to know how much I'm spending, and I'm going to pay the same to whoever I'm hiring that has to get themselves to the airport. Sometimes parking at the airport, so a lot of times I may want to drive if I'm taking some equipment with, or if my DP's bringing some equipment with, it's easier to drive. So this could be up to like $100 for the 2 travel and a shoot day, right? If I'm basically using the airport parking lot that's near the gate. So besides parking, you get to the airport, then you have a cart. You usually rent those $7 or $9 carts, right? But they add up. You just put them in there so you know your cost. But typically, that's a couple of carts you got to get each time you jump on a plane. So that could add up to typically around $40, $50 on one of these type of shoots. Then you have your baggage fee. Now, here's a really interesting thing about baggage fee. If you have something called a media badge, which you can make for yourself as long as you're in the world of media, you could fly with oversized bags, I believe up to 70 pounds for $50 flat rate per bag. And there's no limit. So you could take 6, 8, 10 bags and they're all $50 flat. So that's why I use my media badge to travel this way. So a lot of times when I was freelancing, I was getting that from companies like, so a news station you work for, they may give you a media badge. But if you own your production company, you could also create your own and then use it. Say I'm with media, they see your gear and they give you that rate. Otherwise, the third bag per person ends up being $100, $150 plus whatever the overweight bag is. But I will make a video showing you how to travel, especially with Southwest, how sometimes I could travel with zero cost whatsoever. But I'll save that for the gear video. So there's gear and baggage fees. Then you have obviously your flight, and then you have your hotel. When you land, you have your rental car. You have your rental car gas because you have to return it with gas. And then you sometimes have parking. So you're going to have to pay for parking separate on top of the hotel cost. Then you have your meals. Now, the meal, you could do it a couple of different ways. You could actually, you will put in the meal that you will spend on the day of the shoot. But typically, you want to pay your crew that's traveling with you something called a per diem. So I'm going to put per diem here. That's basically an amount of money you typically could pay in cash to your crew members that are traveling with you. From my experience, it's been somewhere around $75 to $100, and that makes them responsible for their own breakfast and dinner. I still buy the crew lunch. So the meal and snacks or craft, all that is on their meal. Now, remember, this is a super small crew of 4 people, actually, right? So craft cost and all that is going to just be blended into the meal. It's going to be pretty inexpensive. So these are my big categories, right? There's the labor for the shoot day. That doesn't matter if I hire local, if I bring people in with me. Then people have travel in and travel out. Usually that's 2 separate days around the shoot. Even if it's a 5-day shoot, right? It becomes a 7-day commitment, right? You have a travel in, travel out. Then your gear is obviously going to be way different, right? Sometimes you may spend $5,000 on gear rental. Sometimes it's just as little as a couple of cameras and a super basic lighting package, and audio is brought by the audio tech. But now, what are some of the costs when it's related to travel? So this could be pretty significant because what I noticed is flights, for example, now are twice, sometimes 3 times as much as they used to be. Hotel costs have gone up. Rental costs were relatively the same as I've done in the previous years, but rental gas was almost double as before. So all these could be a significant cost. But I would say on a shoot like this where you're taking a couple of people, you end up spending somewhere between $2,000 to $3,000 just on the travel portion, right? So you could do that as a pass-through cost. This is for a 1-day shoot out of town, or you could take on the expense. And I should mention, I didn't know this when I was starting out, but it is customary for anyone that you're traveling with, you got to get their own hotel room. I haven't shared a hotel room with anyone unless I did an indie film when I was 22, okay? So if you're taking on this cost, you definitely want to make sure all your crew members that you're bringing with, local crew doesn't matter here. You don't get them a hotel room typically. They're working locally. But for everyone else, you want to get them a decent hotel room. I typically end up even searching for a 3-star hotel because I don't want to, have the crew get a bad experience or have bad rest before the shoot. So again, this ends up being maybe $2,000 to $3,000. Sometimes it's been $4,000 or $5,000. Sometimes it's even higher than that, depending on if it's a super last minute and we have to get more expensive flights. Okay, so you want to basically do your search. Just go on like carrentals.com and go to hotels.com and go to your different airlines and kind of break down this cost. So when you price this out, you get a pretty clear idea. Now, just to give you an idea, a shoot like this could be around the $8,000-$10,000 range for the shoot part, plus there's editing, right? So you definitely want to get higher level clients. That's why I recommend basically you do your outreach and your advertising and your client acquisition all over the country, right? It doesn't have to be limited to your small town, especially if you live in a small town. And that's why I wanted to make this video, to show you it's possible, right? Adding $2,000-$3,000 to a shoot, to do it anywhere in the country, basically. Obviously, international is going to be much more expensive. It's going to give you a lot of opportunities for clients that you right now may not at all be thinking about. And I did make a similar video about pricing a shoot in town. That goes into some of the things that related to profit and to overhead expense, which I did not cover here. This was the hard cost of doing a travel shoot. So watch that video to see how I structured the entire pricing for a video shoot. So I hope you found this useful. Let me know if you want to see the gear video, and I'll make that related to travel shoots, and I'll see you next time.